18th, summer may have finally broken. Roll call, please.
Calling the roll, Mr. Gallagher.
Here.
Ms. Baker. Here. Mr. Tuma. Mr. Tuma is absent at the moment. Mr. Brady. Mr. Brady is absent. Ms. Conwell. Here. There is a quorum. Also like the record to reflect that Councilman Miller is in attendance.
And welcome, Mr. Miller. Thank you. Public comment.
No, Mr. Chair, no one signed in.
Okay. In your packets, we have the minutes of April 30th meeting. If they're in order, I'll accept a motion. Motion, and I'll second. All in favor? Oh, and she left. We'll revisit that when the councilwoman returns. We have no matters before the committee, although we have discussion purposes. Some of our more important things, I think, on the agenda, especially with our new jail administrator. So Brandy, if you would, do the introduction, please.
Thank you, Councilman. Good afternoon, Council. Brandy Carney, Chief of Public Safety and Justice for the county. So very excited to introduce here our new jail administrator for the county, Rhonda Gibson. She has significant background in jails and corrections, so she's able to give an overview here, but we're excited to have her on board.
Welcome, Ms. Gibson.
Thank you. Good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for having me for a brief introduction. As Brandy said, new Administrator of Corrections at the Cuyahoga County Sheriff's Department. It's my 12th day in that position, so I appreciate everyone's patience and help so far as I'm navigating through the whole facility. I've been able to meet with lots of departments to include HR, the Executive's Office, Personnel Review Commission, the Clerk's Office, the Prosecutor's Office, Public Works, and also been involved in many, many meetings as we work to improve the operations of the jail. As Brandy also said, I have many years of experience in corrections, over 16 years total. And I also have another 8.5 years in the criminal justice system working for a prosecutor's office as Director of Victim Services. In addition to that, I also worked 4 years at a mental health and substance abuse counseling agency. I have an associate's degree in intervention advocacy and counseling, as well as a bachelor's degree in organizational management from Bluffton College. At the current time, I serve on a handful of appointed boards for the state, one being the Ohio Jail Advisory Board, which is acclimated with the Bureau of Adult Detention. I'm also on the Ohio Justice Alliance for Community Corrections, which is appointed by the governor, and also on a couple subcommittees with the Buckeye State Sheriff's Association, one subcommittee dealing with medical and mental health issues, and the other dealing with community corrections. I previously was a certified Prison Rape Elimination Act auditor, and I audited both small and large facilities. I have also been a Corrections Academy commander in the past, having done several of those for Wood County Sheriff's Office. So today, in my 12 days, I have acquired a couple goals, and first and foremost is continue to recruit and hire staff to support the operations of the Justice Center, as well as increase training to the staff. And when I talk about training, I mean not only those just recently hired, but also those who currently work there, whether it be training for supervision, whether it be leadership training, or maybe it's just the basic topics such as fire safety, use of force, etc. So I appreciate the opportunity by the county to employ me, and I look forward to working with everyone.
Well, thank you for coming in. I know you're busy, and I know you have a lot to catch up on. as any of us would if we were in your position. And I can at least express from my position, and I think my colleagues share the thoughts that we will provide you with what you need. We need to hear from you on what you need, and certainly the sheriff.
Okay,
Don't be a stranger. If there are concerns, we are here to help fill any voids that you may have. It's hopefully a new day in the county jail, and you're a part of that. And you wouldn't be there if things were good. You're there to make them good. And we have great confidence that we're heading in the right direction with you. I think it's a little unfair to throw any real big questions at you right now as far as vision and things like that, although I'm sure you have that, but I will over time address those with you, both publicly and privately, as well I'm sure my colleagues will also. There's a great interest in fixing the jail, at least from this council, I'm certain the administration, and with your hire through the administration, I think that's an indication that they're serious about moving forward, and we're very happy with that. With that, are there individual questions?
Yes.
Ma'am? And then
To the chair, to Ms. Gibson, I missed your first name, Rhonda?
Rhonda.
Okay. From your view of the jails, what is your initial view of the jails? What is your opinion?
I believe that the items that I've seen are correctable. I don't believe that it's going to happen overnight. I believe that with the addition of staff, we can resolve a lot of the issues. So we'll get there with that. I believe that I have a lot of support, at least everyone appears to be very supportive at a local level, a state level, and even a national level. I further have seen there are a lot of very good staff there. I'm hopeful to give them direction and help them improve the operations. It's not just me, we're all a team there. So we all have to get to the goal for it.
So when you say staff there, are the correction officers under, forgive me in my lack of jail systems, but are the correction officers under you? Would they?
In the chain
Take
of
direction?
command, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So who do you report? Who would you report to?
At the current time, I report to the sheriff.
Okay. And my last question, have you been given all the reports so far from outside agencies of what's been going on? Have you been privy to those?
I have been given reports. As far as whether it's all of them, I can't say for sure.
Randy, she's been given all the reports?
Hi, Councilman. Yes, to my knowledge, we did receive and send out a packet of all the reports that have been around to make sure that everybody received those, including herself.
Thank you.
Mr. Miller.
And if I could just follow up, I'm sorry, but the vacancy of George Taylor, who is the chief deputy, the number 2 within the sheriff's office, when that is filled, the jail administrator as well as the 2 captains on the law enforcement side will report to the chief deputy as an FYI.
Mr. Miller.
Mr. Chairman, Ms. Gibson, first of all, I just want to say thank you very much for your willingness to step in and take on this challenging task at this very important time for our county. I really appreciate it. And on behalf of all of my constituents, I say that.
Thank you.
I am going to be unfair. I'm going to ask a big picture question now. The downtown jail currently has a population of 2040. That's the last number that I heard, and is rated for about 1760. My belief is that it is exceedingly difficult to run an effective jail when you're way over the rated capacity, and that to my mind, getting the population under control would be my number one priority. And my question is, to what extent do you share my belief in the importance of that issue? And secondly, to what extent are there things that you as jail administrator can do to help achieve a reduction, or are you entirely at the mercy of the judges and other outside forces?
So the first part of your question is, am I interested in reducing the jail population? Is that correct? Okay. So yes, I would be extremely interested in that. In fact, we just had discussions this morning about that very topic, to include bail reform, etc. So that kind of leads into your second question. I absolutely believe I can be involved with the criminal justice system as a whole to try to reduce the population of the jail. That could include the judges. Obviously, they're the ones that order the incarceration to us, so they are a big part of it. It could also include collaboration with law enforcement agencies. Is there something we can do, a pilot project, that they don't necessarily come in custody? Or maybe there's some projects where persons going through a mental health episode maybe have a direct commit to someplace else. So there are several things that could be looked at. It's very early, as I said, 12 days, but those are all things on my mind.
Okay, well, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Gibson, I'm very encouraged by your response. I think you're thinking down the right track, and I strongly encourage you to pursue it and let you know that you have my support, and I'll do anything that I can do from this position here to help make that happen.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
Just want to make sure I also say welcome, and we look forward to hearing more of your vision and what you're going to bring to the jails. You know, I agree with my Councilman Miller that it seems that the overcrowded conditions have really led to a lot of what we've seen. But even with that, and you're not always going to have perfect conditions, it's also, leading by example and making sure that those that are under you understand the rules and guidelines, and as you are in training, understanding what is right and what is wrong, and making sure that we know what's going on every day in that jail. Recently, and it's probably unfair for you, but maybe Brandy can answer, we just got word that there were like 74 less inmates in our jail in this month. Have you heard that? And that's of course great news, but I wondered, because it is such a high number, what attributed to that? Is there someone working on that? Is there an effort that is making that number drop, or is it just one of those things that we should anticipate it going back up?
So, Councilwoman, I do have the average ADP, but average daily population for each of the jails, our 3 jails. As many of you are aware, during the winter months, that number went down, which historically that often happens, but also media and everything going on about the large population that we did have the jail. I think the judges, the prosecutor's office, the sheriff's office all did work to do what they could to keep those numbers down. I can't specifically speak to last month. However, I will say that we regularly engage in conversations again with judges, prosecutors, as well as sheriff's office, and trying to continue to identify ways to bring the number down and keep it down.
Right,
But I can't
appreciate
speak to that specifically.
All right, I guess it would be good to know, because it is a
Yeah.
pretty substantial number. What happened? Who's doing what? What is going on in the judges or in the referrals of where these, where people go when they would have automatically gone to the jails? Where are they? What is the thought process that is leading to this? And if we don't have an identified answer, we should probably research that and find out. Unless it's just a coincidental number that we should just anticipate will go back up again, it's a, I would appreciate knowing if there's outside sources working on this, like our judges, what are they doing?
I can absolutely follow up specifically on that. Just recently, in the last probably 2 weeks, we met with Common Pleas administrative leadership, judge leadership, as well as City of Cleveland the same, and talked about numbers, and that particular item hadn't came up. Obviously, we have Muni Court bind over too, so, but I love looking at the data and seeing that, so I can follow up absolutely.
To that point, we've been told, and I don't know if you were there, Councilwoman, there's a seasonal bump. When it gets warmer, we get more prisoners.
If you recall, last summer was unfortunately very high, yes, sir.
And a lot of people ask me, they're like, why is the population so high? The bottom line is I don't put people in jail. The courts put people in jail. The police bring them to jail to appear before the courts, who then determine whether or not they're going to stay in county jail. So the fix is within four corners of a piece of paper that we can do, and I know they're trying to work on it. But the reality is once we, I guess, get bail reform, I think central booking is going to be a really important part of this. And I don't know out in Lorraine, do they have central booking or not yet? It's not a panacea, but it is a process in which we can get the movement of those that, quite honestly, shouldn't be in jail with an attorney, understanding what their rights are and understanding what their charges are to appear later. So we're not the ones that keep them there, and we're not the ones that are going to keep them out of there. The number is the number, but it's easy to find out how they got there. Now, how to move them is the bail reform, central booking, and I think central booking's on us. The jail reform's on the courts to figure that out. And like I said, there is a committee working on that. So with that, Ms. Rhonda, welcome again. I don't know if you came with Brandy or not. I got a few more questions for her. If you need to get back, then you would be welcome to be excused. If you want to hang around, that's fine. But again, we wish you the best. And if there are concerns, even concerns to the point where you would prefer the information you're sharing is sensitive and you're not getting what you need, search one of us out. We're all on board to get this thing fixed. And again, I would be surprised if that happened, because I think we finally have got the ship pointed in the right direction, and you're part of that. So welcome.
Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Okay, unless you need me.
Brandy, that kind of goes into where I wanted to go next. And we're doing is it 120 beds in the dorm?
So the fourth floor new space is, I think it's 118 beds. It's two dorms. One is
Right.
60 and one is 58 for capacity.
Right, and that'll bring us to just under 1,900 total.
With the current ADP, but also remember there's restrictions on that place. For example, having a dormitory requires the classification. It can't be a high
Right,
risk level
right,
inmate.
right.
It's also, and I apologize if it's two, but I think only one of the dormitories is classified as only a maximum 7-day holding facility. So we can't have an inmate in there longer than that.
Okay.
And I'm sorry, I have Matt Reimer from Public Works. Looks like I might have made an error, so I apologize if you don't mind.
Matt Reimer, Public Works, Mr. Chairman. No, that is accurate. I thought you wanted my clarification on that. So the South Housing Unit in that area is a 7-day stay.
Right, and we're looking at, what's the ETA on opening?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So we had a really good stage of construction right now. We have the epoxy finishes and paint systems going on, so it really is taking shape. We have some pictures here too if you're interested, but that And the North Housing Unit, those same systems are being done in the South Housing Unit now.
Right.
Following each of that, all of our plumbing fixtures and all the other final installations are happening. So we expect to have construction permit inspections the week of, the third week of July. After that, we'll be engaged with our furniture installation, as well as then our final walkthrough and package submission to ODRC for their occupancy approval. So we're looking at early August right now, sir.
Right. I stopped up there last week, and it really looks good. Thank you. And I think the work has been fantastic. Interesting, going back last year, they were ordered to have it by October, which was, I think, less than 60 days out. And here we are in June. You know, it was just an impossible task to get that done and done right. And I thank the guys, the workers that have done it. Brandy, your oversight on that, along with the sheriff, has been important. Those are needed beds to get those those folks out of the jail proper into there. If they're just 7-day holds, they're not as obviously troubled as some of the folks up in the jail, and that's important. Now, moving from there directly over, I noticed the numbers at Euclid stay the same. I see the numbers at Bedford are somewhat the same. Nowhere really near capacity at either one. I'm troubled, obviously, and I stated that last time with Euclid. We're losing our pants over there. Is there any other change that we need to make over there, or what's going to make this make sense? Because right now, it doesn't make any sense.
Sure. So if you recall this council and Councilman Gallagher, thank you. We initially had the contract for the Euclid facility up for a 5-year renewal. And we decided, along with, you guys had asked that it only be a 1-year renewal. We look at whether or not we can truly get those numbers where they need to get to for that facility. And if not, really evaluating where we're at. If you also recall, we have the Marshals prisoners, the majority of, in Euclid, for example, today there's 32 prisoners, the majority of which, over 20, are the Marshals. When the Marshals were here last year prior to their report at the downtown facility, they often had 80, sometimes 90, larger number of prisoners, but they too have limitations on what they allow for at that facility. So that number is also low because of the facility. So I guess, again, just going back to the point, if it's not a facility that's working for us and we're not able to get those numbers where they need to be, we really need to look at, what other options we should move forward with. There's over 20 COs at that facility
Right.
that are already trained also.
It just seems to me, unless something dramatic happens over there, we're just chasing it. We could use 20 COs downtown. It's turned into what seemingly is a private club for the federal marshals, and that's good for them, but bad for us. It hasn't really produced what was promised. And quite honestly, Bedford the same, but that's moving along a little bit better, it seems. But I think the numbers, and you'll report to us in a minute, aren't very good. Anybody have any questions on Euclid? Yes, sir.
Yes. When does our current contract with Euclid end?
Councilman, if I recall, and I can get you the exact, I think the renewal started March 31st of this year. And again, we did a 1-year renewal, but let me confirm that and send that to you today.
March 1st, okay.
March 31st, so it would go through March 31st of 20.
And if we were to not renew when March 31st of 2020 came along, what would happen to the facility?
So Councilman, I can say that myself and Councilwoman Simon did go to Euclid City Council a few weeks ago. They asked that we attend. We were actually the only ones on the agenda, and some of those same questions came up. They had said one thing, the police chief and others, is that they do not want to get back in the jail business. There's tons of standards. It's difficult. It's costly. And so the law enforcement side was pretty adamant So the council and the mayor, as well as their police department, had asked us if in fact we don't renew this contract in a year, are there options for possibly utilizing that space for some of the reentry programming or classes because it's close to downtown? They asked us that. I said that's nothing that we could commit to at this point. But I did say that we would go back there in a couple months and give them an update on where we're at and what we see as the near future. So unfortunately, I can't answer your question, but I can tell you that we are looking at that and planning.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I spoke to the law director, actually, they were here when we talked about that. And their opinion is, the administration and the law director was, if it's not working, it's not working, and they probably want to cut a deal with somebody else or us to take those prisoners, so.
That's what they had said, probably downtown facility or for us. Yes, sir.
Right, it's, but, we'll give it a couple more months if, and I don't see it changing much, and we just can't take this hit. And it seems that we're spreading our resources out unnecessarily. So we'll let that go right now, find out where we're at.
I
Anyhow,
think it's fair. We are looking to Bedford Heights, we're at 81, so that is going up. But again, that's rated at over 200 capacity. So we're trying to fill those. I know we just sent another list to medical yesterday asking for clearance on individuals. But again, these facilities, if we're going to have them, because of cost to operate staffing and the need for staffing, we need to obviously fill them.
right. And the per diem that we're getting doesn't cover. I mean, had the numbers been right initially, I think we would have been a little bit better. The numbers weren't right that were produced to us. We had to rely on the experts at that time to give us the right numbers. They did not, which led us into Cleveland basically making $5 million a year, which is good for them, but we can't take the hit that we're taking. Plus the medical we're providing, the COs out there, and all the other ancillary things that could be downtown or out in Bedford right now, depending on where we go. Do you have a number on Bedford, what we're spending a year out there, or what, more importantly, what are we losing a year in Bedford?
So off the top of my head, we pay over $500,000 a month on staffing, just staffing. The other costs are pretty limited. I think we pay $1 for the lease, so pretty limited. So I think it's around $7 million a year. Over $6 million of which is staffing.
Right.
Our staffing out there.
And if we had the proper space downtown, that'd be $7 million back downtown.
Yeah, and when you think about, for example, sir, the upcoming food services RFP, those are additional costs for these outside facilities. So if we can make them work, we want to. But if not, there's resources and cost savings there. But really it comes down to reducing this number down here in order to allow for that.
And you've notified Cleveland on the per diem increase?
We did. They, per the contract, the 2% allowable increase, they received 90 days notice, and so that will start in July.
Well, I think, committee members, what we're looking at is, were some bad decisions that we were part of. And the reason we were part of it, we were given numbers that didn't make sense, not that we knew. And I don't even know if the individuals that gave us the numbers knew that they didn't make sense. But they're at least $20 off per day, per prisoner. The services that we're going to be providing in October through Metro, when they're fully up and running, I can only assume that those services are going to be stretched, and the last thing we need to do is stretch those services beyond the building downtown. And certainly, I mean, I think I could be talked into Bedford, but I just don't see the Euclid thing turning out. We're going to have to put pen to paper and figure out exactly what this is costing us, exactly where the needs are going to be starting in October. So I think by the time Metro starts in October, we should have an understanding of what we're going to be doing with these contracts. The other important thing, and what has been a strain, has been the deal with Cleveland. I'm not certain whether that's a good deal or a bad deal. Financially, it's a bad deal, we know that. Stretching our ability to handle this has become more than I think what we were told. I think we need to look at that, and if we need to get out of the jail business, until the numbers make sense, we're gonna have to start looking heavily at that. So I would hope by October, we have an indication of where we're at, what we're spending, what we're losing, most importantly, and where we can go from there. Maybe it makes sense, maybe it doesn't, but we're gonna have to make some really tough decisions, I think, come October as to where we're gonna go. And if we have to notify the folks in Euclid and Bedford and Cleveland that we're done, we're done. That's what the contracts are for, and we're gonna have to own up to our side of the contract. With Cleveland, it's a little bit more difficult, because we took over, well, the 120 Holding was, well, you couldn't call that a jail anymore. Was, well, that was not good. So, there are some intricacies here, especially with the contracts we're gonna have to take into consideration. And I don't see this as an easy fix to get this moving in the right direction, because clearly financially it's going in reverse.
I think over the next 6 months and we've continued to look, but now with new jail leadership, us filling some of the new leadership positions over there, like you said, Bedford Heights, we want this to work. Regionalism makes sense. I think we all obviously believe in it, but is this working? Filling up Bedford Heights, that need? I mean, we're still getting requests from cities to take on their prisoners, even with everything. So people do not want to have their local jails, but to your point, does it make sense? Your question about Euclid costs us around $2 million annually, and we receive from the city of Euclid $400,000 annually. So just so you know.
Right, and, yeah, until the numbers make sense, every city's gonna be calling us. So we're gonna have to deal with that. We gotta look at these contracts. We'll have to be guided by the law department on where we're at contractually, figure out a game plan moving forward. I really think that central booking makes sense if we do that. I just don't know if we have the buy-in of the various municipal courts with the downtown court to do that. It's a very complicated structural thing that has to happen for this to work. And maybe that was the thing we had to do first to make it make sense. Yes, sir.
How long is the contract with Cleveland?
The city of Cleveland, if I recall, doesn't have a definitive end date. It does reference 10 years somewhere in it. Do you know, the law department happen to know? Sir, I should know that answer, and it's escaping me now, but I can absolutely get it to you. It doesn't have a definitive end date that I recall, but it does have, if not prior, a 10-year renewal or something to a 10 years. But I can send you that information today, Councilman.
And is there an out clause?
We'll have to find out. I imagine there is. There usually always is, and I don't know why it's escaping me, because we just talked about this recently, and I looked when I went to Euclid, but I'll confirm that and have Law or myself follow up, sir.
Okay,
Sorry
there
about
is,
that.
but it's very complicated. And also, which complicates it even more, is that Cleveland doesn't have a jail. Now, the reason I'm picking October is for the numbers to come in, but I think it would be fair only to Cleveland if we determine that this is not working and we're gonna have to move off this, that they're searching for a new police headquarters. If they have to build a jail, we're gonna have to wait till that happens. So regardless of what the contract says, we're gonna have to at least wait for them to be able to build their jail to back out of the contract legally. So that's why I said it's very complicated. Yes, ma'am.
But at a minimum, at this contract period time, could we increase the amount that we receive for them per inmate?
We can only go up 2% a year.
2% is allowable, and with that, you had to justify the 2% per the contract. Yes, ma'am.
Well, that would be easy to justify.
Which we did, and so that does start in July, which would be 1 year for the contract.
So even at a point where we could discontinue the contract, if I'm hearing that correctly, at that point of, getting tough with the contract itself, negate the 2% and, maybe negotiate a higher amount in order for us to continue with that program, or, at
I
that
think the
point.
discussion is to negotiate a different amount possibly. Does it make sense where we're at? I think there's a lot of options that we need to look at. Yeah.
We're not sitting in a very good spot when it comes to Cleveland. And that's our fault. Again, had the numbers been correct at the beginning, I think we would have been looking a little bit better here on both sides. The numbers weren't correct, and even with the 2%, it'd be at least 10 years before we got to today's number. And in 10 years, today's number is gonna be 5 years too late, you know, so we'll have plenty of time to talk about it. It's very complicated, and the last thing we wanna do is leave anybody in the lurch, much like Euclid. They're pretty much on notice, our thoughts on what those numbers are, and they understand that. And, you know, we're looking to work with them, Cleveland certainly. And, you know, the Bedford facility seems to be our best bet right now. But again, $7 million out there as opposed to downtown, these are all things that we need to consider.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
Just a comment that, you know, it's not good about the numbers. We all know that, but I'm not totally distressed over that because whatever we lose, municipalities gain, and they all have money problems and they can use the help. You know, it's not a terrible thing. You know, what I'm most concerned about is that this situation is contributing to our challenges relating to operating an effective, safe, and humane system. And I think that's where our priority needs to be, is to how do we make this work so that all the prisoners can be managed safely, humanely, with manageable numbers, and that's what my big concern is.
If I could say, Councilman, that, you know, I haven't been in this job a year, but bail reform and working on that, the diversion center, as well as regionalizing jails, or that decision was when I was hired, one of the main priorities, continues to be a priority, but the day-to-day has absolutely been, for myself, the sheriff's office, all the way down, as well as others, is ensuring that the operation within the jail first is our number one priority. So we would all echo that.
Okay. Yeah, well, on the Justice Center Jail Committee that we're talking about, whether rehabbing the Justice Center building, whatever, the argument, and I've said this before publicly, the argument on rehabbing the jail is over. Now that we've learned what we've learned, again, for 25 years, it's been past due. So we're talking about that and replacing that. It's going to be a big ticket item, but it is what it is, and we got to do what we have to do. If you're interested, Mr. Miller, we've been told on that committee, which are public meetings, that if you want to look at Indianapolis is building a Justice Center jail. Right now, they've broken ground, from my understanding. Many of those that have put that together are on our team, have been hired by the county to direct us. And when you look at the county that Indianapolis is in, dynamics are pretty close. The demographics are almost right on. Their crime, I think, is a little bit lower than ours, and they're building a 2,400 bed facility with 300 dedicated beds to psychological services, medical services. So in essence, the new jails of today are becoming the medical facilities for psychological institutions of yesteryear. It's something that has to be looked at, and I would be all for that. So the beds go up, but the purpose of the beds are directed more for those that need the services in psychological areas and medical areas. So, but again, that's still in discussions, but I think when we're dealing with a physical building that's 25 years past its due date, I don't think there's much of a discussion as to what you're going to do. So we're gonna have to work together on that one. The Justice Center, I don't know, but again, that's a 1975 building, and built at a time when courts were different, the demographics were different. The size of the county was incredibly different. The general population has fallen well at what, 25%, 20 to 25%. So we have to take all this into what we're dealing with and incorporate it into this committee, what we're gonna do with that jail and these contracts, how we're gonna move forward. And I think it's gonna be important to listen to the experts and that what they tell us, I think we need to follow.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I totally agree with you about the rehab versus build new. We need a new facility. But I don't accept the 2,400 number. You know, it's truly a case of build it and they'll come. You know, we build a facility for 2,400 prisoners. We'll have 2,400 and we'll struggle to get it down to that number. We need to come up with a number that challenges us to really be creative about how we manage the population. We have 60% of our population pre-sentencing. It's you know, you only have to look to Summit County where they're doing much better, and this is why I think it's so important that we move quickly on these issues about bail reform and mental health and addiction diversion and working with the judges and all this stuff, because we need to get some idea relatively soon as to what we can accomplish and where we can get on population management, so that we don't end up building a facility that has hundreds of cells more than we need and costs an extra 50 or 100 million. I think we really need to take an attitude of don't build it huge and create an incentive that we're going to find a way to manage the population to where it's supposed to be.
Councilman, can I briefly respond to that? So what I've been really pleased with the last month or two since the contract started with our buyer's rep for the new Justice Center is their team has come and convened us only a few meetings and said exactly that. We are not looking for a number of beds and increase it by 5%, but we want to understand the operation, the climate, the bail planning, the other police departments that might not be in there now and their needs, the data, so that we can truly see where can we get this to, so we're not building facilities just to keep increasing. So I really feel like that is absolutely the sentiment of the group, and they would agree.
Right. The one thing we were asked when we first met is all these experts in the various areas of jails. We have a nurse psychologist, we have jail directors. These are all schooled people in the area, and they've all told us that they're the experts, they're gonna get the information and they're gonna produce that. And what that information produces is gonna be your answer. So to blanketly say, I don't want 2,000 or I want 1,500 and make it fit is absolutely counterproductive to what the information that they get from the courts, from the law department, or the police departments in the surrounding area, for everybody involved that deals with the Justice Center, from the courts, the muni courts, the common pleas courts, the juvenile court, all that is rolled into one. And when they ball it all into one, they're gonna come up with a number, and that's gonna be your number. And
Mr. Chairman, I would agree with that if we've had a wonderful track record in the last 50 years about how we've handled the whole question of incarceration and jail population management, but it's been horrendous. I mean, we have the highest percentage of our citizens incarcerated of any country in the world, and it's like it's something like quadrupled since the 1970s, and we just cannot maintain the status quo in the next facility. We got to reverse this, and you know, there are fundamental questions, and I, for one, am not just willing to listen and accept. Of course, I'm going to listen to what they say, but I'm not willing to just swallow expert advice without question in an area where we as a country have performed so unbelievably terribly over the last 50 years.
Well, it's a complicated issue, and what complicates it further is history. And the history in this county isn't good when it comes to jails and the Justice Center itself. And I'm sure you're well aware, the reason that we had Jail 2 was a federal lawsuit forcing the county to build it. They built one too small for the population that they had. Lawsuit was filed, and that's when the county built Jail 2. So it took a federal court to do that. Did that answer the question of overcrowding in Cuyahoga County? I think a resounding no. So they built it too small, then they added on. Now it's overflowing, and I'm sure the bill that they will come is closer to the truth than anything else. But the reality is if you don't have enough beds for the courts, you're going to find yourself back in federal court building more. And that's what we're trying to avoid. Put all these experts together, let them determine that. Let's look at the data, make sure we're agreeable on that. But to stand in the way of whatever they determine at this point in time, I think would be a grave error, because we need to get moving on this thing. And again, as I said, go to Indianapolis, look at that, look what they're providing. Jails are different today.
Yeah.
Back
Not
in the
just
day,
bed
back in
services, like you
75,
said.
you went to jail. And when you were done, you got your hearing, you went down to prison, or you got out. We have a whole different group now. The psychological problems, and that wasn't our fault. That's the closing of the psychological hospitals. Institutional hospitals. Where did those people go? They went to our jail. So you have to now provide those services that they were being rendered in CPI. That's no longer there. These people don't disappear. They show up at your doorstep, but the doorstep they're showing up on is at the jail. So we're going to have to work this in a way it makes sense for everybody. And you're right, it's a difficult question, and we'll get to the bottom of it, and we'll do the best we can. We're human, we'll make errors, but we're also have the ability to do the right thing.
I'd just like to raise one other question, which is, and I'm not saying I have a definitive opinion about it, but I'm leery about this idea of the people with mental health and addiction problems, the 300 that are embedded within the 2,400 in Indianapolis. You know, whether those folks should be treated within a jail facility, or whether they should be treated in a separate facility that's more totally focused on mental health and addiction.
Well, that's, if you look at it, it's basically a wing of the jail. And keep in mind, they're not holding them in jail to get them services. They're in jail because they did something. So it's an opportunity to provide service that they would never get. And you only have them for a certain amount of time. So it's kind of like you have a captive audience, I guess you would say, that where you're providing these services that probably they're not going to get on the outside. And the danger is you release them, and are they going to go search out help? Probably not. So it's a cycle, it's a societal thing we have to deal with. And I'm not saying we're going to get to the bottom of it, but we're going to try. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chair, Trevor Meckler, council staff, I just wanted to follow up with a couple questions that Councilman Miller asked related to the agreement with the City of Cleveland. The current contract with the City of Cleveland, it does not have an expiration date. for us handling the City of Cleveland inmates. And it's a minimum of a 14-month transition period if the county decided to terminate the agreement. And there's some factors in there within that termination period, but it's part of a transition period that would last at least 14 months.
All right.
I didn't think there was an end date, but I apologize for seemingly making up that 10 years.
Yeah, well, you know what, there is that contract that's perfect. And I've always said, we're not here to make money, but we're certainly not here to lose money for anybody. Because the money that we'd be losing is the taxpayers of Cuyahoga County. We don't have the authority to be stupid. So we're gonna look at it and try and make it as fair as we can for everybody involved. Where we're at right now, we were stupid, and we're paying for it. But we were stupid on a point, we were lied to, or maybe told not correctly what the actual dollar figure was per diem for an inmate. So we're stuck with it, we'll figure it out, we'll get through it. But these are gonna be difficult kind of bridges to cross, and we welcome your input, Mr. Miller, absolutely. Thank you. How we doing on corrections officers?
Correction officers. So as council is aware, you guys had approved for the budgeted 675 officers. As of today, we're at 605 officers, with 5 more additional starting on June 24th. So that leaves us with the 605-70 open positions. I did just want to note, I hope I had grabbed it, excuse me, sir. What I thought was important for you guys to note. Let's see, a couple more notes about that. I'm sorry. As you're aware, the contract for a correction officer pay increase, approximately $2, recently came in front of council. Recently, HR did do a job fair that was held. That was held on June 12th. Of the 111 attendees, 72 were interested in correction specifically in the position. I apologize. Let's see. This is information I got from HR.
Well, I'm just interested in the bottom line.
Overall, so just to say, this is important, Councilman, if I could, 66 were recently eligible to take the upcoming test. And yesterday, 48 of those people did show up and take that test. And so I think with the recent job fairs, which I applaud HR for hosting and really focusing on COs, hopefully we can really get close to that 675. I wanted to provide the one data HR had that I think this year we hired around 60 plus, but we also lost around 35, 40. So it's difficult for retention needs also.
Has the timeline moved in a positive direction on hires as far as the timeline?
I can absolutely say we were, HR, everyone, PRC was working great, and we were consistently moving weekly. Things got significantly decreased in the timeline. The last maybe 2 weeks, maybe 3, there was a couple of changes that had to be made. We still move forward, not as quickly, but it's back on track now with the job fair. So yes, and it is much faster now.
Do you have that number of days?
The number of days it takes, it's down to
From testing.
approximately 2 months for the process, but I have the timeline upstairs I can forward.
Okay,
Yeah,
that'd be
and the old one, which is
Right,
nice to
which-
see, yeah.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, on that point, can I ask a question through the chair to Brandy? The 675 number we've all been trying to attain to, that covers all the jails that we currently have?
That is
That's
correct.
a total number?
That is
Okay.
correct.
Okay.
So the information, from January of this year until now, we've lost 35 COs and we've hired 58. So it's also retention, which hopefully some of the recent improvements to their contract will help.
Right.
But the timeline, we have been moving and hiring.
Yes, ma'am.
Along with hiring and trying to get to the 675, do we also have adequate administration over those COs as that number increases?
So Councilman, I'm happy to say, we never had, for example, lieutenants in the jail structure, which was a need. So we recently, over the last few months, have worked with PRC for the new job position. 8 new lieutenants was a recently posted position, as well as 4 additional sergeants and 4 additional corporals. So the last 2 were additional positions, but to help us out with, again, some of those leadership positions needed over there.
If I may follow, so I don't know what the ratio is from that leadership to the correction officers, so are we in line with the ratio with the numbers you just gave us, or are we getting there? What is your goal in hiring to oversee the correction officers as they increase up to 675?
So hopefully I can answer your question appropriately. The new positions, the leadership positions, and again, that extra layer I just discussed, we feel will appropriately be able to manage the staff and the increase in staff.
Okay.
We have approximately, currently not including the new positions, for jail staff, not including COs, but the rest, we have around 140. So 140, and then again, we'll get up to 675. So it's
Okay, like I said, I
fairly
don't-
good ratio.
Right, I don't know what the correct ratio is. I mean, 140 sounds like a lot, but I don't know if that is the right number. I guess I'm just asking, as we increase the correction officers, are we also making sure that those that oversee them is proportionate to them?
Yes, ma'am. Again, new lieutenants, 4 new sergeants, 4 new corporals. For that very reason, I also recently spoke to HR about a second in command to the jail administrator to work on compliance and more administration. So we're making sure that it's appropriately staffed throughout. The sheriff had the state DRC come in and make staffing recommendations, ACA, and we've all agreed and taken to those, and that's what we're moving forward with now.
All right, thank you, Brandy.
Thank you.
Okay, finally, the food in the jail. How'd the RFP
I forgot
go?
one. So we did release the food services RFP for the jail. We received 3 responses and that closed. Last week, myself, along with warden and jail administrator, some of the sheriff's office fiscal leadership staff, some other staff in public safety that have regular knowledge in doing RFPs. So we had a group of about 7 or 8 of us that are worked on the evaluation score sheet last week. And next week we have a meeting to come and score the proposals. So moving forward, sir, we want to make sure to be thorough. They're very large, obviously. We want to make sure the evaluation tool that we're using is, appropriate, apples to apples. But I expect we'll probably have a recommendation in the next month.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
So through the chair to Brandy, have you had a conversation with Walter P. From HHS in regards to, so we're going through this process of food service, but we also have food service contracts for the homeless shelters. And the female shelters are not happy in terms of what they're getting. So I had brought up a conversation with Walter to, as this contract moved forward, to see if that was something that we can include and just have one bill for everyone versus, all the different contracts that we have.
Sure, I can absolutely follow up with him. Now is the perfect time if that's something we would, so I can look to see if that makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. So the way I figured it's about 5 or 6 million we're eating over the cost of the per diems that we didn't anticipate right there. So with the healthcare and the food. So it just shows that, those numbers were bad at the beginning, they've gotten worse, now they're really bad, so we're gonna have to work that out. So we'll do that, we'll figure it out.
Chair, can I ask you something?
Yes, ma'am.
You stated that we were maybe going to move out of the healthcare business. I mean, the jail business, sorry, I'm on healthcare.
No, as far as taking prisoners from other cities.
Okay,
When it was brokered to us, the $99 tag was the one that got us close to that. It was a little bit of room in there for us to make money, but not a lot. And we wanted to keep it close to a break even because it was the fairest thing we thought for our partners in the various communities. And now, as it turns out, and I can't get a direct number, but the real number is between 120 and 130. that was without the Metro contract, without the RFP contract for the food service. So that 120, 130 might even be 130, 140, or somewhere in that general area. Suffice to say, minimally, we're probably losing $20 a day per prisoner, and we just can't take that. I mean, and again, I'm not making excuses. We were told wrong numbers.
I mean, you can't, there's not a consistent number, because like you said, it depends on the ADP changing, it depends on if
Right.
you use all three facilities. But that's, the deputies, the cost of transport has significantly gone up. That's it's not part of the
Right.
jail, but that's another cost, so yes, sir.
And the people that pitched it to us are no longer here, so we're really kind of stuck with what we have, and we'll have to figure it out.
If I could just say, a lot of this has been about kind of negative or, with the different facilities and costs, but I really am happy with the new jail leadership, internal leadership, new positions. The work of Public Works and HR and everyone has been great, as well as you guys. So I really think now is an ideal time, and, making sure that all these decisions, but it's all the right people
Right.
to decide what that is.
Just
It's not all
want to
negative.
just want to get it right.
Yeah.
And like I told my communities, we're not here to make money off you, but we're not here to lose money off you either. So if it works, it works, and we're happy. And if it isn't, we're going to have to adjust on the fly. And we'll see. We're not there, but I think October is going to be a big time for us to make a decision. And bringing the experts, the new jail director in, and telling us what's what.
Sheriff, chief, yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Let's see what else I have for you. That's all I have for you.
Oh, nice.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Ms. Conwell, you stepped out. We have a motion on the floor with a second to approve the minutes of the April 30th meeting.
All right, I
Are
second.
you okay with that?
Yep.
All in favor?
Aye.
Great, thank you. Finally, is there somebody here from HR? Sir? Yeah, oh, yeah, we're done. Hi, they called you with my question?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Michael Brown, the Manager of Talent Acquisition and Employment for the county.
Okay. The question was, what was the offer to Ms. Gibson and the gentleman from Michigan?
They both were offered $114,004.80.
114. And Mr. Mills was at 125?
Yes, Mr. Mills, when he left, was at 124,155.20.
Okay. Who determines 114 as opposed to 124?
So we do a compensation analysis where we look at market data with our compensation manager. We pull together subordinates. Those employees are on the same classification level as the current incumbent coming in as well. So we look at all of that data to determine what that median would be, what that offer range would be. And I will provide for you, Mr. Chairman, that Mr. Mills, when he first started in the position of Regional Jail Director, was at 117.
Okay. But he left at 124
Right,
after?
after 2% increases over those years that he was here.
So he started at 117?
117, yes, sir.
So the median went down $3,000?
Well, I believe it was, so at that time, we did not have a compensation department that looked at that information. Now we have that department where you look at complete market data, so we can bring in our employees at the correct level, looking at market data and the rest of the information that we have from those employees.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you for providing that.
No problem.
Okay. Anything further? Miscellaneous? We're adjourned.